Welcome to Nguyen Nam Podcast channel. When a pup's age is still counted in weeks, he'd be lucky to get much farther than the front door. But in 1954, a 6-week-old black and tan pup from the suburbs of Sydney made a 7,500-mile journey on Qantas Empire Airways to his new home in La Crescenta, California. His name was Sir Boomerang, and he was a Sydney Silky Terrier. His new owner, Mrs. Evelyn Holliday, had seen a photo of a pup just like Sir Boomerang on the cover of the newspaper supplement this week, and, naturally, she just had to have one. She arranged to have her silky pup sent in style across the Pacific. A beaming Mrs. Holliday can be seen collecting Sir Boomerang from a Qantas stewardess in a Los Angeles Times story titled Rush 1 Puppy, dated February 14, 1955. Peer into the history of the Silky Terrier and you'll see even more stories of international travel and irresistible cuteness. Not quite the rough and tumble beginnings you'd expect from a dog bred to stock poultry farms for vermin. But this plucky little dog with the glossy coat is quite accustomed to being defined by what he is not. In the late 1950s, when the Silky Terrier first started appearing at dog shows in the United States, it was met with stares and a few scattered snickers. Murmurs of oversized Yorkie echoed in its little V-shaped ears. Indeed, the Silky resembles the Yorkshire Terrier, as well as the Australian Terrier, but is neither. And those traits that make it not a Yorkie, and not an Aussie are often the same qualities that Silky breeders and owners find most endearing. They're small but not fragile, feisty but not yappy, pretty but not sculpted. As noted in the breed standard, their inquisitive nature and joy of life make them ideal companions. While the general, and most convenient, explanation of the Silky's origins is that they resulted from planned matings between the Australian Terrier and the Yorkshire Terrier, there may in fact be more to their heritage than that. Both the Australian and the Silky Terrier have in their histories a dog traced to Tasmania known as the rough-coated terrier. Less a breed, more a type, they had a rough, textured coat of blue and tan, or a sandy color. Also called a broken-coated terrier, this scrappy little ratting dog may have been bred in the late 1800s with other terriers, including the Yorkshire and the Skye, all of which were imported from Great Britain. Untangling the descriptions of the Australian and Silky Terriers from this time through to the early 20th century can be a maddening experience, with even more breeds thrown into the mix, such as the Cairn or the Dandy Dinmont, depending on who's telling the story. The Kennel Club of New South Wales was one of the first to start differentiating types of this foundation terrier. In 1898, the club offered classes for Australian rough-coated terriers and silky-haired terriers. Other kennel organizations followed suit, and in 1903 the club drew up and adopted the first standard for the silky-haired terrier. In her book, Australian-Born, Australian-Bred, Jan Boyce notes that at this time, many Silky breeders also bred Australian or Yorkshire Terriers, and much interbreeding occurred. This early standard was the first step toward establishing the Silky's own identity. By the 1920s and 30s, the Silky was established as a useful farm worker and a popular pet in its homeland. It was time for the rest of the world to take notice. Before Sir Boomerang checked in for his Qantas flight, Pan American World Airways also played a role in the Silky's introduction to the U.S. In 1950, Merle and Peggy Smith, who both worked for Pan Am, were dining at a San Francisco restaurant when a woman came in with a puppy. It was, she told them, a Sydney Silky Terrier. Mrs. Smith made a fuss over it, and her husband promised to get her one in Australia for a Christmas present. And on his next trip to Sydney, he brought back a female. So good that the couple who knew nothing about dogs would soon become members of the newly formed Silky Terrier Club of America, and their first dog, Brenhill Splinters, along with their second imported Silky, Wexford Pogo, would go on to produce a line of champions. It was one of their puppies, Redway Blue Boy, who appeared on the cover of This Week and inspired Holliday to import Sir Boomerang. The magazine, as well as the Smiths, received hundreds of letters from readers wanting a Silky of their own. The president of the American Society for the Prevention of Cruelty to Animals, Hugh Payne, imported 2 Silky on the basis of the magazine cover, and another high-profile fan, Hollywood star Ann Miller, requested a Silky while she was on tour in Sydney. Blue Boy went on to appear in even more magazines, including Popular Photography and Sports Illustrated, and it wasn't long before the rare new breed was a popular pet. As the San Francisco Chronicle noted in 1955, rarely does a breed new to this country take the public's fancy as completely and quickly as has the Silky. The Smiths were not the only Silky exhibitors who started out as pet owners. Many of today's Silky fanciers will tell you that they started out with a pet, until their desire to find fellow Silky owners led them to their local dog shows and then into the ring themselves. And so it was on March 25, 1955, when 10 people interested in breeding Silky gathered at the home of Roland and Betty Stegeman in Richmond, California. That day, they formed the Sydney Silky Terrier Club of America, STCA. As the club worked toward full AKC recognition, they dropped the Sydney from the name of the breed, at the request of the AKC, and started a stud book. By 1958, an estimated 400 to 500 Silky had been imported from Australia, and on May 9, 1959, the Silky Terrier became the 113th breed to be recognized by the AKC. The STCA became an AKC member club in 1966. The Silky was alien to most people when they started, and for years after that, according to Beverly Lenig, a former Silky breeder, current AKC judge, and STCA vice president. People would say this breed looked like a Yorkie, and they would say, no, and try to point out the differences. It's an education that still goes on today. Florence Males, a former breeder, owner, and handler of Silky, still makes the distinction in the judge's education she performs for the STCA. The key point she makes over and over again is that they're more Australian Terrier than they are Yorkshire Terrier, except that they have the Yorkshire Terrier coat. Unlike the Australian Terrier, which is double-coated, the Silky's coat should be, according to the standard, straight, single, glossy, and silky in texture. Unlike the Yorkie's coat, the Silkies should not approach the floor. If it's a proper texture, it's not very hard to groom. It's so much like human hair. In a 2001 issue of the Silky Terrier Times, breeder Linda Gross recalled the first time she saw a Silky in the arms of a woman at an all-breed show. The dog's hair was spectacular, liquid silver tipped in black, rich browns, and golden tans. Mesmerized, Gross approached the woman, who told her it was a Silky, and invited her to feel the coat. As she let the dog's hair run through her fingers, that's why they're called Silky Terriers. The hair was cool to the touch and like that of a little girl's. Silkies today and tomorrow. Males says that the breed has developed nicely over the years. In 2007, the Silky came in at number 74 in the rankings of breeds by AKC registration figures. It's a position the club is happy with. Through careful management and education, the breed has managed to duck the mass trend of mini-sized breeds that can be toted in purses. In 2021, the breed ranked 116 of 197.